Welcome to Thursday's edition of Renew Plus. I'm Pastor Tony. Thank you for joining us again today. And let's get back into our series entitled No Doubts. We've been talking about the last couple of days the life of Peter. And you know, the gospel accounts have a lot to do with some of the mistakes and the failures of Peter. But I'm glad those are recorded, because what he's doing, what we're seeing right in front of our eyes in the gospel accounts, is Peter getting himself out of the middle of his life, out of the center of his life, and putting Jesus in the center of his life. And of course, as long as he had Jesus in his focus, he was operating in faith many times and did some outstanding things like walking on the water, as we're going to see down the road. But when he had himself in the center of his life, he became self-focused, just like all of us, and became self-righteous. Through personal pride, the enemy just ate his lunch and popped the bag, so to speak. But we want to go over to the 22nd chapter of Luke today. Luke chapter 22. Yesterday we were in Luke chapter 5, and we were talking about how Jesus had borrowed Peter's boat while he was teaching, and Peter and his partners in the fishing business were over on the side over there cleaning their nets. When they had gotten done, Jesus had gotten done, he said, I want you to go launch out, take your boat, launch out to the deep for a catch. And of course, they had already cleaned their nets and put them away for the day. And they knew that the fishing was better at night than in the daytime. And they had toiled all night and caught nothing by their own self-effort, by their own self-works. They had gotten no results whatsoever. But Jesus said, I want you to go launch out into the deep for a catch. Jesus didn't go fishing, he went catching. And so Peter kind of said something, insinuated. He said, you know, we've toiled all night. We're the professional fishermen and we've caught nothing. He said, nevertheless, at your word, we'll cast out the net. In other words, we're going to try this. But at least he did it, all right? At least Peter acted on to some degree, even though there was some hesitancy there. He kind of withheld some there. At least he stepped out on Jesus' word. He said, nevertheless, at your word, I'll cast out the net. And of course, to their astonishment, the fish hit the net and it began to break. It was an old net probably that they had put aside, and they tried it with that one and it began to break. And so they called their partners over. They got the other nets out. They had so many fish that day that their boats began to sink. In other words, what the goodness of God is never manifested in our life is never according to God's ability to give, but according to our capacity to receive. I believe if they'd had more boats, bigger nets, bigger boats that day, they would have filled those up as well, because of the goodness of God, because of the word of Jesus. But they filled up all they could. They reached their capacity, their limitation of what they could to receive. They came back in, and in response to that, Peter, if you remember, he said, I am a sinful man. Depart from me. I am a sinful man, O Lord. In other words, because he had his eyes on him, he saw such a goodness, something that he did not deserve, did not earn, did not work for, did not come from himself. It came from the goodness of Jesus. He saw a manifestation of that day like he had never seen before. It made him want to get away from Jesus. It made him want to say, Jesus, just separate yourself, depart from me. I'm a sinful man. But you know what? Jesus knew that. Jesus didn't do that outstanding good thing in his life and for his partners that day because Peter earned or deserved it, because he was sinless. He did it in spite of himself. He did it out of his own goodness, out of his own graciousness, out of his own love for Peter. And you know what? I tell you what, I believe that was something that just really impacted Peter and all those around, you know, James and John and all those around him that day. In fact, right on the heels of that, Jesus called them into the ministry. He said, come and follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. They forsook all and followed him. Why? Because they saw how good Jesus was. The goodness of God displayed and demonstrated through Jesus that day. And you know what? Our calling in life is not based on our deserving or earn it, our own qualification. It is based on what God does, his graciousness to us, his unmerited favor in our life. his unconditional love in our life. And of course, the finished work of Jesus. All right, Luke chapter 22 is where we want to pick it up today. Verse number 31. This is toward the end, is right around the Passover, right before Jesus is going to the cross. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. See, Satan saw something on Peter. He saw a calling, a purpose. He saw that he was going to be one of the pillars of the New Testament church that Jesus was building. And so Satan really put a target on him and asked for him that he may sift him as wheat. And then verse 32 said, but I have prayed for you. Jesus said, but I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. And I want you to see this right here. I want you to see what happened right here. Satan wanted to have, listen, a lot of people have this idea that, our life is basically a chess match. We're pawns in the chess match game of life between God and Satan. That is not what's going on here at all. We're going to see why Satan was about to have an entrance into Peter's life right here. We're going to see how he got in. Satan just can't do whatever he wants to do. Peter went on and wrote about this in one of his epistles, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6 to 8. He said that Satan, like a roaring lion, he as a roaring lion, goes around seeking whom he may devour. Seeking somebody he can devour. In other words, somebody that's out in the open, that's vulnerable. And see, it's not because God just leaves us alone. It's not because God says, all right, here, you try this one out. Here, this is a pawn. I'll let you take this one. No, that's not the way God is at all. But many times the whole context of what Peter's talking about, 1 Peter 5, is when we do not submit to God and His grace. When we get out into personal pride. We think, well, we can do this. Personal pride is all self-centered, self-focused. It's all about self-righteousness. And see, Peter was working through all these issues right here, and he had stepped out into that and got self-centered. We're going to see in just a minute. And so Satan saw somebody sitting out there vulnerable. And he said he had desired to sift him as wheat. But Jesus said, but I prayed for you that your faith would not fail. And when you've returned to me, I want you to go and strengthen your brethren. Verse 33 goes on to say, and Peter said to the Lord, Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. See, that's Peter's own personal pride there talking. That's his own self-righteousness speaking right there. He said, Lord, I'm ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. But you know what? Peter had really faith in himself. That's the problem right here. He had his faith in his love for Jesus. But the problem is he needed to have faith in Jesus' love for him. See, Peter's salvation and Peter's deliverance and our own salvation is not based on our love for the Lord, not our love for God. 1 John chapter 4 verse 19 says we love him because he first loved us. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't love God, but our love for him is always in a response. See, God did for us, he provided his own son to be our Savior. He provided salvation for us, a free gift of righteousness for us, forgiveness of sins for us, a good life for us, his goodness in our life, not because of our love for him, not because of our works and our performance that earned and achieved and deserved it. Now we see there that that's wasn't the case at all. It was because of God's unconditional love and abundant grace and mercy towards us. See, but Peter had faith in himself. He had faith in his love for Jesus. In fact, he was saying, I'm going to die for you, Lord. But that's not what Peter needed. That's not what we need. Even though our life may be required of us in the witness of the gospel someday. But let me tell you something. That's not what saved us. What brings salvation to us is not our giving our life for him, but him giving his life for us. Him loving us. And see, Peter was missing that right here. And that's what left him vulnerable right here to Satan's attack and for Satan to come in and try to sift him out as wheat. And then he said in verse 34, then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you deny me 3 times that you know me. I tell you, that just astounded him. You know, Peter said some other things too. He said, you know, even though others are going to leave you, he said, I'll never leave you. Even though others may deny you, I'll never deny you. See, that was his own personal pride and self-righteousness talking there. He had taken himself out from under the grace of God, and he got himself self-focused again on what he could do for Jesus. And you know what? That's not going to work. It will always fail. You know, it goes on after that and talks about how right after that Jesus led his disciples into the Garden of Gethsemane because he knew what was facing him. And, you know, Jesus was under such pressure right there and under such temptation that he sweated great drops of blood. And he took his disciples with him. And you know what? After his anguish and prayer out there in the Garden of Gethsemane, he turned around and Peter and all the other disciples were asleep. Peter said, I'm going to give my life. I'll never deny you. I'll give my life for you. Yet he couldn't even pray for 1 hour. So we see right there that Peter, in his own ability and strength, that was never going to get the job done. And that's what he was talking out of right here. Now, you know, the Lord said to him, and he said, Peter, I know you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. He said, I know you're going to do this. But notice that he had said earlier, he said, I prayed for you that your faith would not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. You know, most people would look at, and Peter did exactly what Jesus said. He denied him 3 times that he ever even knew him, under the pressure, under the gun, so to speak. And most people would look at that, and they would say, well, Peter failed. You know, must be that Jesus, you know, his prayer didn't work here. But it did. You know, even though Peter failed, Peter's faith did not fail. That's what I want you to see. Even though Peter, in his own faith in himself, failed, he denied the Lord 3 times, just like Jesus said. His faith in Jesus did not ultimately fail. You know why? Because he returned to the Lord. Even though Jesus said, I know you're going to deny me 3 times, he also said, I'm praying for you that your faith would not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen the brethren. He returned to the Lord. See, it's not us messing up, blowing it. See, we're all going to, in our own self, we're going to fail somewhere down the road. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things we shouldn't have done. But your faith does not fail unless you give up on the grace of God. Unless you lose your focus and faith in the grace of God and in His unconditional love and in His ability to reconcile and restore you. See, if Peter had not returned to the Lord, we can say his faith would have failed. But his faith did not fail. He had faith, even though he had denied the Lord 3 times. He had faith in Jesus' goodness because he had personal accounts with that. Jesus' unconditional love, His grace. He had sat under that for 3 years, and now it's beginning to dawn on him. It's not about me. It's not about Peter. It's not about what I can do for Jesus. It's not about my love for Him. It's all about what He's done for me. It's all about His love for me, this unconditional. And you know what? In the middle of, even after he had failed the Lord, after he said, I'll die with you, I'll never deny you, he denied Him 3 times. But even when he failed, he remembered the Lord's faithfulness. He remembered Jesus' grace, goodness, mercy, and unconditional love. And because he did that, by faith, he returned, and his faith did not fail. You know, again, we're just seeing where Peter's going here. We see the struggles that he had, and it's all because he was self-centered and self-righteous. But we see also that self is getting out of the picture, and he's putting Jesus in the picture. Doubts and unbelief are leaving, and now faith is being purified and strengthened in Peter's life. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. We got some other good things in store for you tomorrow. Join us again tomorrow, Friday. If you'd like additional resources and materials, go to tonycowan.org, and we will see you tomorrow.